Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at the next ship in our Down the Line series, going down the line to the Preussen. This is the Tier 8 KMS Bismarck. First things first, this ship is pretty famous. This is a ship that a lot of people want to go down the German BB line for to get this particular ship. Like I said, very, very famous ship, and I'm sure all of you by now that have been playing for at least over a year understand how this ship works and have most likely faced off against this battleship in game. With that being said, is she any good? And my immediate answer to that question is absolutely. I think this battleship is awesome. I think she's withstood the test of time, though, as I've described in my previous ships down this line guides, the ships have really played differently and have to really alter their identity throughout when they are first introduced to the game. You had your ships, I guess, low tier, like 3 to tier 6 as your dreadnought slow battleships. And at the Bayern, you picked up those 380 millimeter guns. And then at tier 7, you kind of get this weird, like Swiss Army knife ship that I think a lot of people despise just because of its wonky turrets and accuracy. Very inconsistent, as you saw in my guide, even though my build tried to alleviate that and strap a band-aid on that problem. I still think that ship a lot of people hate because it's so inaccurate. But hopefully the build, if you do go after the build that I recommended, which is a little out there, I totally get it, can help with some of those issues so that, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times a game, you're actually landing where you want your shells to go rather than completely shotgunning your shells and going nowhere that you want them to go. The Bismarck and moving onward towards the Friedrich der Grosse and the Preussen, I implement a hybrid secondary build on all my ships. I don't just go full bore into the secondaries, and I don't go full bore into tankiness and survivability of the ship. I kind of blend the two together. Now, why is that? Well, as we know, the German main tech line BBs, they do have good secondaries, but there are, and I'm sure you guys can agree, there are just other ships in this game that have better secondaries from DPM standpoint to the damage that they can output, from the range they can throw out. Like there's just so many better secondary ships than this line, and that never used to be the case because this was like the original OG line that could do that. But now you have the Schlieffen line, and God forbid you have the Libertad line, right? They just have better ships that can do it, better. Basically what I'm trying to say. I keep sounding like a broken record here, but I'm trying to stress that to you. So that is why the build that I showed you earlier on in this video, I highly recommend now moving forward. All these captains should have the same build. I think I do. I'll double check that in the later videos I released down this line from the Freddy and the Preussen. But it's pretty universal. So if you want to carry your Bismarck commander and move him up, you can very well do that. Previously in the line, you really couldn't do that, especially with that Ganesha now build. Like that thing, no fucking way would that ever be viable, realistically speaking, unless you're trying to meme a top tier. And then lower tier, I just think it would be kind of a waste to not invest something in the secondaries, because these ships do have decent enough secondaries where if you build into them, they can still put in some work, even though you don't fully build into them. And what do I mean by not fully building into them? Well, I don't take in the third slot, I don't take the secondary mod. I think it's secondary battery mod 2, I believe. And why is that? Well, going down this line further, Bismarck, Freddy, Preussen, you only have 8 guns. And we need to make sure that those shells are landing on target more consistently and more reliably. And just fully speccing into secondaries is not going to get the job done. You don't have the secondary DPM, in my opinion, to justify that, nor do you have the concealment or the range. It's kind of that like hot mix. And you look at it, you're like, well, floppy, it has 11.3, 11.6, whatever. Like that's pretty standard. And I agree with you. But again, a lot of other battleships that you are speccing into, they just have better with the rate of fire chances, concealment values, that kind of stuff. The Bismarck, in my opinion, really shines for two main reasons. One, her hull is fucking phenomenal. I love this hull from an armor setup, from armor scheme. Very, very reliably tanky. Just all in all, a great armor scheme and a great angle in regard to the bow of the ship and the whole shape of the ship. And then two, um, I do think that she has better guns than you are led to believe in this game. From a penetration standpoint, from if you build the ship right, from an accuracy standpoint, I just think the community as a whole is still stuck 7 years ago when this thing was a full send into the middle of combat, get your secondaries blazing, and you're expected to get 100 to 200,000 damage game just like that and be the team tank. If anybody ever in random battles tells you you're a German battleship, you are the team tank, I want you to laugh hysterically at them because those days are gone. You are not the team tank because theoretically speaking, every battleship in the game, with the exceptions of some, are the team's tanks. So just because I'm flying the German flag doesn't mean that's the way it is. Also, if someone says, get in there and brawl, I would again laugh at them because you can't just get in there and brawl with the mindset. There's only one, maybe two lines that have that mindset that can do that. And the Bismarck isn't one of those because you have to pick your spots. And even going into the Schlieffen line, even more so, you have to pick your spots because that's a little bit more of a squishier hole, right? So again, you need to read the map before you make the push. You can't just be like, all right, guys, we're going to full send A, push hard. No, don't do that. Let's see what the enemy team deploys first at that cap before we go ahead and make that conscious decision to push. Because once you push, I mean, the Bismarck can get away with it a little bit, but especially the next two, once you push, you are fucking committed to that flank. And good luck taking your massive turning radius, tucking tail, and running and trying to fall off detection. There is no way in hell you're going to be able to do that. So with this guide, of me blabbering on before I do the whole port analysis here, please take with what I'm saying to heart. But at the same time, I want you to formulate your own opinions about the ship. Just let me tell you why I feel the way I feel about it. And then you guys can play the ship how you choose and then make your own opinions about the ship. That's kind of the whole idea of this channel and kind of the whole idea of what I'm trying to do with these reviews and these guides. And I know when I first did this line, I announced that I was going to do this line as my next analysis line, I knew I was going to be met with some negativity and controversy just because this is a very popular line and it's been so instilled in your minds that this ship is a brawling line. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but at the same time, I'm also saying don't just go full bore with the secondaries because any day of the week, you're probably going to lose when you go toe to toe to other secondary ships in this game. Okay. That's all I'm saying. So that's enough talking about it. Let's go in and take a deep look at the Bismarck with the beautiful Hamburg port in the background here. We're going to look at the armor layout here first. 32 millimeter nose. We have a 32 millimeter aft, and we have some of these like 60 millimeter aft end belt armor, and we have like this fore end armor belt, which is acting as our icebreaker with 60 millimeters, which is going to prevent a little bit of overmatch from that nasty Yamato and Musashi's and stuff like that. Again, they can still overmatch your upper nose, but again, if they're if you're closer and closing the distance, they're going to really struggle to do anything with this. They're just going to get nothing but shatters. Going into your deck, 50 millimeters, which is pretty respectable. That's going to help with the HE spam against you and auto ricochet a lot of armor piercing. And then going from upper belt, you have 160 millimeters going down to a main armor belt of 320 millimeters as well. Going into the Citadel, we do actually have a Citadel, which is at the waterline of 45 millimeters and an upper deck of 80 millimeters. Now, two things about this Citadel. One, it is a turtleback armor scheme. And this is awesome because this will protect us from Citadel damage at most ranges, especially when we close the distance. That is incredibly sloped. And a lot of times the shells will go in pen or ricochet up and get over pens. You will never or hardly ever to rarely experience Citadels when up close range, especially flat broadside. The problem with this armor scheme, and I've seen other YouTubers talk about it, and it should be pretty well known, but for those who don't understand, there is a massive flaw to the turtleback armor scheme, especially when we're covering battleships such as the Tirpitz, I guess the Ganesh now too, if you really want to go in there, but more so the Tirpitz, the Bismarck, the Friedrich Gross, the Pommern, the Preussen, the Grosser Kurfürst, Mecklenburg too. There is a flaw with this turtleback armor scheme. And that is that the turtleback armor scheme comes out and extends forward through the front and the fourth turrets. But if you ever find yourself coming in a larger caliber or high penetration AP shell ship, and you see the Bismarck coming at you in like regards of this angle or like of this angle, you understand what I'm trying to say. You can actually aim right under and on a degree angle and go and bypass this turtleback and actually score Citadel hits right here, which is only 180 millimeters. You have to penetrate plus the 60 millimeter belt. This is possible to do, like I said, around this angle. Anything steeper, good luck. Anything flatter, no chance. It's going to have to be at a certain angle. And again, this is a flaw with the turtleback and the way it extends, but you could basically bypass the turtleback and shoot right here. This is a harder skill, obviously, than like cheeking a Yamato and Musashi. This is going to require precision and timing to utilize this. And also, the enemy sailing the German ships usually don't pay it much mind because they think they're citadelable proof because they have the drawback honor scheme, but that is incorrect. There are some ships that can directly bypass this turtleback and score Citadel ribbons. You have to be careful of that. Going into survivability, 69,200 with that 22% torpedo belt reduction, which is super nice. That's going to allow us to tank some and reduce some torpedo damage when incoming, though. But if we land on the nose and the ass, again, that's really not going to do much because that has no torpedo protection. Going into the artillery, you have these 4x2 380 millimeter guns that reload in 26 seconds. Mine have I believe it is a 36 second, 180 degree turn time, and then a maximum range of 21.2 kilometers, which is actually very respectable. And before, I would say if you build this thing for full secondaries, no reason to ever have that range because you're just never going to utilize it because you're just never going to hit anything at that ranges. Now with the build I'm having, I have landed Citadel ribbons at 20 plus kilometers. It is possible, though there is some massive RNG within that. Like, I'm not just going to exclude that. That is a fact. But it is something that is possible. So just letting you know. Going into the high explosive shells, 4,400 damage with a 34% fire chance. And they have the quarter pen of 95 millimeters of HE penetration. Now, let me tell you guys, I very ever rarely shoot HE in my Bismarck. There are a couple scenarios, Bow in Petropavlovsk. There are Bow in Yamatos, and I can't accurately chunk superstructure half the time. I will shoot it, or if there's a low NDD that I just need to land a PP touch on, I will switch to HE. But I'm basically staying with the armor piercing because the armor piercing is just the bread and butter of not only the German battleships, but it should be the majority of battleships in this game. And then the armor piercing coming in at 11,600 with the same shell velocity meters a second of 820 per both shell types. I mean, what is there to talk about with the main battery? Like I said, I think it's criminally underrated from the penetration mechanics that this AP does have. If we're taking a standard battleship range at max range, we're looking at still about 402 millimeters of penetration, and then about medium range, about 14 kilometers, we're looking at 468. And if we're in brawling distance, which is like 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers around there, we're looking at 561 millimeters of effective AP penetration, which is actually pretty damn respectable. These guns can slap if they make contact. That is the big flaw of these ships, is if your shells land where you need them to land. And that is why the build that I'm recommending allows that to happen more often than not. I've played I don't know how many games with the secondary build, and then the last year and a half to 2 years, I've gone more to the artillery build with that aiming systems. It is revolutionary for me, and I highly recommend you guys do that and get that mindset of this is a fucking brawler, blah blah blah. So like it's not going to bode well for you as you think. Like, obviously, if you're top tier, obviously you read the flank right, and depending on what the enemy's deployment is, yes, you can do brawling. I'm not saying you can't. I can't stress this enough. But you're gonna have to take more of a conservative approach in the early stages of the game and then make your decision. You can't just full send it right away. That is going to lead you back to port so incredibly quickly. Moving on to the secondary, 6x2 150 millimeter guns. These do have the same HE penetration, that quarter pen at 38 millimeters with an 8% fire chance. They're reloading at every 7.5 seconds, and you have the 8x2 105 millimeters. Again, keeping that quarter pen with 26 millimeters, 1200 damage with the 3.4 seconds. Both standardized ranges without the flags on, without the captain skills listed, are just 8 kilometers for you. 8 kilometers, not terrible at all. We can work with that because we can build upon that and eventually get our ranges out to like 10.2, 10.3, I believe. We have the airstrike AA defense. So it is worth talking a little bit about the AA defense. And this is not really pertain to the numbers. Your maximum range is 5.2. So again, that's a little bit under the, I guess, more AA focused ships, which are usually 6.9, and the pretty much standard 5.8. So you have the 5.2, which is pretty standard for the Germans. The AA, in my opinion, will most likely never ward off an enemy strike, potentially the occasional bad tier 6 CV. But again, when the plane drops its initial payload regarding the tier 6 and tier 8 carriers, you will be able to shoot down a fair amount of the squadron. Tier 10, you're really struggling against tier 10 CVs. That's my opinion playing the ship, especially with the build that I have listed. Commander skill being a 21-point commander, you're just dealing with these things. You are a battleship at the end of the day. You don't want to be the Lone Ranger on a flank with a CV game because you will get focused and you will be back to port so incredibly quickly. Moving on to the mobility or the maneuverability of the ship, you have a 31 top knots topping out for your ship with an 850 millimeter turning circle radius and a rudder shift time of 12.8. Obviously, our rudder shift time is reduced because I do take in the fourth slot, the rudder shift modification. Again, I know I probably told you about the damage control party systems, which again is more universal. This is going to help with the, I guess, more aggressive towards middle to late game, allowing you to push in and control those fires and floods. For me speaking, and this is coming from where I have what I recommended at the beginning of the video, and I believe I did recommend the damage control system modification too for those players that really want, aren't maybe the best in regards of like controlling their damage control party and are more concerned about the incoming damage that they're inevitably going to be taking in the German BBs. I played a little gutsy the last like 5 rounds I played on this thing before I released a video. It really allowed me the flexibility to dodge a little bit more and be a little bit more active. I never really slowed down in my Bismarck, pretending like maybe with a lone, like utilizing the island coverage of my ship. I will still recommend the damage control system modification too, but for those captains that really kind of have, let's say, a higher level commander, like let's say they have a 21 commander and they're usually good at managing their damage control party, then yeah, I would try the rudder shift modification or steering gear modification, as it really allows a little bit more flexibility when turning your ship, and I can really play around with a little bit more because I think it drops it from like what's the standardized rudder shift time of 16 seconds and it goes down to 12.8. That's super nice. It allows me to dodge a little bit more with ease for those incoming PEDs that are going to be coming my way. Plus, coupled with my hydroacoustic search, I can really dodge those torpedoes, not with ease, but have a way easier time dodging those torpedoes. Concealment, with the concealment module, as you see listed here to the left, it does come down to 14.3. Just so you are aware, and this is one commander, I have another 21-point commander. I do not take the concealment on my captain, and you saw that. Now, why do I not take the concealment on my captain? Well, 14.3 is already pretty damn respectable. And if you go to tier 10, let's say with like builds like the Montana and whatnot, you're already having 14.1 kilometers detection, and that's relatively around the same range, give or take 100 or 200 meters. I don't think you need it. I think you can utilize those 4 points somewhere else in regards of the fire prevention skill or the emergency repairs specialist, something like that. I think you're just going to be better off utilizing those 4 points somewhere else rather than just going cookie cutter build with the concealment. We need to branch out a little bit more. Even up when you're like insanely high with the high tiers, like at what tier 10, tier 9 with the Freddy and the Preussen, like when you're at 15.9 or whatever it is, like, I mean, taking concealment, getting it down to what 14.8 or whatever it can get down, is that really going to help you? Like, you have to think about, these are things you have to weigh. And to me, no, not with the way you want to play the game. I don't think it's really going to benefit you that much. Given the fact, if you play the way I'm going to help not educate, that sounds kind of demeaning and condescending, teach you, help you, advise to play these ships, you really don't need to work too much on the concealment value, guys. So, okay. And then some final thoughts here before I go ahead and show you some gameplay. The Bismarck for me is an incredibly fun experience, and I think it's an incredibly strong ship, especially at its tier. I think it's just all in all a great battleship. It's a great package. It's everything you really want in your BB. The only thing that was lacking for me previously, before I'm going to make this guide, was the artillery. I thought the artillery was very wonky. You got one salvo that was like, oh, this is not bad, it's respectable, and the next salvos are like, holy shit, what the fuck are my gunners smoking and drinking? These shells are nowhere going where I want them to go. Now, with taking that aiming systems mod in the third slot, that is going to help our shells. I don't know what it is. It's that small margin that now allows us to be that much more accurate. And when we look at our main battery, we're clocking in at a sigma of 1.8. I mean, I guess it's pretty standard. It's not 1.7, which is usually bad. I mean, the dispersion at what? If we go to like a standard, let's say a standard battleship range in the beginning of the game, around 16 kilometers. I mean, your horizontal is 220 meters and your vertical is 121 meters. I mean, it's not terrible with 1.8 sigma, right? I think, and hopefully with this review guide that I'm going to be illustrating for you guys, hopefully it really sheds some light on what this thing can do. And the last thing I want to talk about, is the secondaries, because I don't think we talk enough about the secondaries and what the ship can do and whatnot with her secondaries. I mean, theoretically speaking, her secondary DPM, which is identical to the turrets, they are sister ships, 253,540, with her actual hitting DPM of 51,236. It's not a bad number. And you will get the occasional fire set, which will help you in brawling ranges. And again, you're looking mainly at those destroyers, those pesky little DDs that when the secondaries are in play, that'll keep those destroyers at bay. That's the issue. And especially because they're automated, we're not manually controlling our secondaries, other than control left click on the ship you want to focus on to get the buff with the captain skills. If gunboat DDs find themselves within that range, this allows you to at least do something, as if your artillery fails you because they're so fucking fast, or they're juking you. At least your automated firing mechanisms can at least land some shells on target. So anyways, enough blabbering. I know people usually skip the blabbering part, but I think it is important we talk about this, guys. So if you have made it this far, awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this, because I think this is really going to allow and translate to your gameplay in the Bismarck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and watch the video replay on her. All right, guys, and welcome to the battle here in our Bismarck. We are in a division, and I always want to make sure I point that out, because I do believe playing in a division will, naturally help you get better results, as you can coordinate with your teammates better, because you're usually in voice chat. So I just want to make sure I point that out to everybody. So I don't think there was too much that my div mate potentially did for me here that was like, wow, you couldn't do this in a random battle. But I just want to point that out. I just want to point that out to everybody. So anyways, so the Bismarck. So what is there to know about her? How do I play her? And how do I think that the community should start playing her? Well, I think we should get out of the mindset that she's a brawler and that she full sends it to a cap and gets there and brawl. Because I think she can brawl, but she can only brawl in certain circumstances as they present themselves. The day, like I mentioned previously in this video, the era, the days of this ship sailing into a cap and doing the 200,000 damage and basically winning a flank solo is done. There's too many gimmicks. There's too many stronger ships out there that can just completely deal with you and burn you down like a crisp. And I think it's going to take you a little bit more brain power to play around those gimmicks. And you're going to have to think about the game a little bit more methodically and strategically. So I kind of try to play the Bismarck more like an American battleship, or just your typical standard battleship role. I want to make sure that my main damage dealer in the Bismarck is my artillery, and I want to make sure that I send, every 26 seconds, I'm sending my 8 380 millimeter guns downrange, hopefully bringing ping to whoever is the target that I'm shooting, right? I think you have to pick your spots too, and your positioning is crucial. I don't want to play at max range. I have 21 point whatever, 2, I think it is, kilometer range, but I also have a spotter, so I could theoretically get even further. I don't want to play at 21 kilometer range. Just because I have the range doesn't mean that I need to make use of that range all the time. It is stupid. I think you really need to get around the 16 to 12, around that range mark, because that's going to allow us to be a little bit more consistent with our artillery and land shells on the target a little bit more consistently, right? That's what we want. Again, targeting destroyers, specific cruisers, ships that have a lot of carry in the game is going to allow us as a battleship player to have a little bit more freedom come later on in the game, so that when we do push, we can make that push possible and plausible. I feel a big problem that a lot of battleship players have in this game is they don't shoot destroyers because destroyers don't have citadels, and they can only score, what is it, 10% of their actual shell damage on the target, I think is what the rule is, or the whatever. And it's foolish to me, because no matter what damage you do to that DD, that is a certain percentage of damage that your DD and or cruiser players no longer have to worry about in order to kill that target. You've already done that damage to those ships. So again, prioritizing those strategic targets is essential. I know a lot of players, when they play battleships, will only shoot at other ships that are flat broadside, and where that has some validity and, I guess, truth to it, and I understand why you would do that, I still think, again, shooting the priority targets is more essential to the outcome of the battle than just doing my massive citadel damage, potential depth strikes on ships, right? So, again, with the positioning, you see a lot of players say, oh, I usually play my battleships in the mid, because then, people sail, to flanks, and they usually expose broadside, and I can pick and choose and blah, blah, and so on. So, and that is true. I 100% agree with that mentality, but I think that mentality applies to certain battleships more so than other battleships in this game. If you have the speed, if you have the secondaries, theoretically, if you have the maneuverability and the concealment, why would you not want to try flanking? Because then, if everyone in their battleships goes towards the middle, then all I have to do is, as a cruiser or our other ship, is angle my ship in towards the middle while having all my guns to bear on the right side or left side, depending on whatever flank you're on. You want to pick and choose, and you want to make sure you create crossfires. Crossfires are essential in a game like this. And I think the Bismarck does it very well, as it can sail from point A to point B with relative ease, and dish out the pain with her secondaries and her main guns with the build I recommend. Also, she has a safety net. She has a little bit of a trick up her sleeve. We now have access to this hydroacoustics consumable. The hydroacoustic consumable, especially when it's German, is improved, meaning that we have, if I'm not mistaken, 5 kilometers, or it's a 5.5 kilometers of ship detection. I think it's 5 kilometers, and the Freddy gets 5.5, or yeah, and I think the Preussen gets the 6, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. It gets that, and also gets improved torpedo acquisition, I believe, at 4 kilometers. It's either 3.5 or 4. I think it's 4 though. And this allows us to be and push with a little bit more ease, where a lot of battleships don't have that. Like, for example, same tier, we have the Iparanga. The Iparanga, I don't know why I switched to my ASW. I think it was just a misclick, by the way. Sorry about that. I think the Iparanga has the maneuverability on its side, and theoretically the concealment if you build for it, where the Bismarck doesn't have that. It just has the hydroacoustic search in order to do most of its spotting for it. And that's where you have to utilize that. So, again, one thing that I've noticed in the Bismarck is, especially when you are top tier, and hell, even if you're, because you have a 32mm nose with that 60mm icebreaker, even if you find yourself in top tier games, you can do the method I like to do, is just point your nose forward to specific targets. And what this is going to do is going to allow you that you can't be overmatched. As long as you're not pushing 460s or higher, you could theoretically get away with just putting my nose forward and really auto-ricocheting and auto-bouncing a lot of shells, which is also super nice. Again, showing you that you shouldn't underestimate the Bismarck's guns, especially with the build that I have listed. There you go. And again, we're at close range. It's a lower tier battleship, tier 7. I get it. I totally understand. You're like, well, Floppy, that's a tier 7 Nagato. Like, come on now. Like, I get it. Okay, but how often, if I would have built for secondaries, even at that range, fully invested in my secondaries, I maybe get 1 less Citadel, maybe get a couple more overpens. I don't dev strike. Like, there are certain things you have to weigh in the pros and the cons. And I think with this build, because I already was getting my secondaries involved, what am I at, like 93 or something secondary hits? I can't really see. With that, plus my artillery being as best as it could possibly be with regards to accuracy, is great. Now, I know back in the day, for, I don't know, maybe some of you know it, maybe some of you don't, there was that whole commander skill rework. And one of the commander skills, which was incredibly cancerous, was the Deadeye, which I believe was if you shot outside of your ship's base detection, you got like a 10% improved dispersion bonus to your ship. Um, Again, and every battleship, I don't know why you wouldn't use it. And some battleships obviously like would benefit more from it, right? Like my Florida, if you imagine if the Florida still had access to that, it would be a whole different game changer. Probably a way better ship than what I personally liked, right? But yeah, I mean, again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to emphasize more of my main artillery, which is going to translate to more damage, um, which is what I want to do. Now, there is an argument to be made. Well, if you full send it with secondaries, with all the secondary skills invested, could you theoretically get a faster reload, get better dispersion on your secondaries, like that kind of stuff? Absolutely. Like, I get it. And more range. But to me, it's not about that. I'm not looking for my secondaries to do flat out damage. I'm actually looking to get fires and keep destroyers at bay, with my German ships at least. That is what I'm trying to do. I really don't care about the raw damage that I'm going to be acquiring with my secondaries, and more about the fire damage, and again, keeping the destroyers at bay with doing raw damage to them as I can penetrate them. And again, with your improved HE penetration, is the damage will naturally come because you're going to be penetrating more armor than you think, right? With the I think it's like 26 and 38, which is nice. That is why there's this thing that German BBs are like the best secondary brawlers. But now when you have the 234 millimeter gun, Goliath guns on the Libertad and Los Andes, like they laugh and spit on your grave kind of thing. So you have to factor that into the mix and the fold as well. But all in all, like the Bismarck for me, guys, is a fantastic ship, and I love her to death. I think she is incredibly underrated, and I think that if you play her the way that I have it illustrated, you should play her. I think you'll get really, really good results in your Bismarck. Now, some final thoughts I do have on the Bismarck are as follows. One, you still only have 8 guns. And for me, as someone who likes battleships with more guns equals more fun, that's just how it comes down to it. I usually think undergunned battleships are just theoretically worse just because of their lack of shell volume and shell amount going down range. Now, yes, I understand there's some exceptions, right, guys? The Georgia with like battlecruiser dispersion or whatever, and God, I can't think of something like the incomparable and stuff like that. But just for me, I just find more shells equals more fun. That's kind of my rule of thumb with battleships. And the Bismarck, where it only has 8 guns, which is, again, I think it's a bit on the lower side in regards of gun count compared to other battleships at its tier. It can still get the job done if you spec into the main guns. My second thought about the Bismarck is the whole conception about being a secondary brawler. I think those days are long gone. I think that this ship can get involved at secondaries with the hybrid build, but only towards middle to late game when there's less enemy ships on the map that can do more damage to you. And when you're picking your spot strategically, then the ship can shine, then it can be a brawler, then it can utilize its secondaries, and theoretically, then it can utilize its turtleback armor scheme, its hydro, and get up in the fray. Don't go into the game thinking I am going to brawl and brute force my way to the top, because it'll end very, very poorly with you, leaving and ending the game relatively quick for you. It won't work. Okay. And if it does work, then you know what, RNG is on your side, because again, this is a game that is incredibly RNG based, and we can't forget that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to teach and educate some things that'll help alleviate and turn, I guess, the random number generator in your favor by doing the subtle things right. But we can't just disregard the fact that these ships as a whole have really been power crept to hell. Now, do these ships need a buff? I don't necessarily think so. Especially the Bismarck. If we start moving up the tech tree, I'll give my opinions on those specific ships. The only ship that I can tell you right now that needs a buff unequivocally and undeniably is the Grosser Kurfürst. That is a ship that I believe has 100% seen the end of days and is realistically no point in playing her at Jacques Lecoq. I'm talking about you here, but I'm sure you disagree with me. But that is a ship that needs a big buff in a massive way. And when we get to that ship analysis, that ship review, I will 100% speak what I think should be done to that ship, which again is taking a more conservative approach rather than give it this, give it this, give it that. Like, no. There are subtle things you can tweak to make the ship better, but at the end of the day, some of the biggest flaws to these ships, not including the Bismarck, including the ones above it, the four ships I listed, which is like the Kurfürst, the Preussen, the Freddy, and the Pommern, Mecklenburg, maybe depending on it, is just the whole size and the height of the superstructure. I mean, again, look at the Bismarck too. I mean, you could theoretically include the Bismarck in this category as well. That is a lot. And that is what? 19 millimeters of effective armor. That is free real estate for HE spam and penetrations that can be done to you. And that, I think, is a big problem with the ship. It's not that the ship is under armored. I've looked at all the armor modules. I've delved deep within the armor schemes and what they actually have. It's nothing like that. It comes down to the play style of these ships, the community and the World War II community playing these ships with the way they think they should be played, and the ship models themselves are all massive flaws to these ships. But by hopefully what I've taught you and presented my pieces of trust me bro evidence with how to play these ships, hopefully you can get better results in your Bismarck and really elevate your gameplay and once again have fun on these ships, because I was part of that community too, that I was a full secondary Bismarck, and then I think after the CV rework around there, I mean, this ship for me was like, dude, it's brutal. I can't do anything in it. This ship needs a buff, blah, blah. But then I had my mind changed. I played it a little bit differently. I approached the game differently, and I was getting phenomenal results, just like what you guys just saw there as an E-ranked Bismarck gameplay. Again, not to boast, not to brag, but showing you that it can work. If you have any questions, by all means, leave a comment below. If you have any opinions, leave your comments below, guys. I really want to hear your opinions on the ship and what you think. For me, the Bismarck is a beast to tier 8. I think everybody should play this ship. And at the end of the day, even if you choose not to utilize the build that I've presented, that I have tested, that I do believe is a superior build, I hope to God you guys have fun, because this is an incredible ship and a very underestimated line in the game. So anyways, guys, like always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Peace out.